Among the most accomplished and fabled tribes of Africa, no tribe was considered to have warriors more fearsome or more intelligent than the mighty Maasai. It is perhaps surprising, then, to learn the traditional greeting that passed between Maasai warriors. Kaserianingera, one would always say to another. It means, "And how are the children?" It is still the traditional greeting among the Maasai, acknowledging the high value that the Maasai always place on their children's well-being. Even warriors with no children of their own would always give the traditional answer, "All the children are well." Meaning, of course, that peace and safety prevail, that the priorities of protecting the young and the powerless are in place. That Maasai society has not forgotten its reason for being, its proper function and responsibility. "All the children are well" means that life is good. It means that the daily struggles for existence do not preclude proper caring for their young. I wonder how it might affect our consciousness of our own children's welfare if in our culture we took to greeting each other with this daily question, "And how are the children?" I wonder if we heard that question and passed it along to each other a dozen times a day, if it would begin to make a difference in the reality of how children are thought of or cared for in our own country. I wonder if every adult among us, parent and non-parent alike, felt an equal weight for the daily care and protection of all of the children in our community, in our town, in our state, in our country. I wonder if we could truly say without any hesitation, "The children are well." Yes, all the children are well. What would it be like if the minister began every worship service by answering the question, "And how are the children?" If every town leader had to answer the question at the beginning of every meeting, "And how are the children? Are they all well?" Wouldn't it be interesting to hear their answers? What would it be like? I wonder. And how are the children? They're well. I was surprised a few years ago when in a survey about worship, one of our members wrote anonymously that they didn't like it when I welcomed the children at the start of the service. That criticism hasn't made me change a thing. In fact, it made me more determined to let our young folks know that they are not only welcome, they are a very important part of this congregation. So important are children to this congregation, in fact, that the early members of our church risked more than criticism. They risked physical harm to themselves and this building by welcoming children here. When and where was that, you might be asking? What was that? Well, I think on Mother's Day, it's time to dust off the story of the open door kindergarten. Because those of you who are new might not have heard the story, and those of you who have been around a while might like to be reminded of the true strength of values that built this congregation. During the early days of the civil rights movement, the UUs here in Augusta were impacted by the writings and speeches of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., including the Ware Lecture, which was given by Dr. King to the UU Association's General Assembly in 1966. This was a congregation that continually made waves in the Augusta community by writing to the Chronicle about matters of race that didn't match up with prevailing conservative and racist feelings about segregation here in Augusta. In 1964, a Quaker from New York named Rachel Dubois came to Augusta to speak about improving communication among diverse groups. But there was some difficulty finding a venue for her that would allow both blacks and whites from Augusta to attend. This church opened its building for her, and a large crowd showed up to hear her. And after the meeting, Dubois was persuaded to stay another day in Augusta and to meet with a group of black and white women who were leaders in their communities. These women asked Dubois specifically to help with ways that their children could combat the violence and prejudice from anti-integration forces in Augusta. 5 young women, black and white, all with college degrees and small children, asked to meet again soon. And it was at that next meeting that the idea of a kindergarten was first suggested. Finding a church to host the kindergarten as well as finance the idea was a challenge. But the women were determined for it to be an independent school with no sponsorship, but also no fees that would prevent those families who could not afford to pay for their children to attend to be able to come. An affordable place that had the facilities and standards for a kindergarten was another concern. But the UU building was rented to them for a nominal fee. And so Open Door Kindergarten was founded in the spring of 1964. When we look back, the interfaith aspect of this non-sectarian, multiracial endeavor is so impressive. Jewish, Christian, Quaker, and Unitarian Universalist, and it was supported financially by many families of Augusta, both black and white. The day that the group decided to hold an open house for pre-registration turned out to be the same day as the March on Selma. Still, both classes filled up, and there were so many parents there that they ran out of punch and cookies and application forms. When the day ended, 22 children, racially and even split, were enrolled. Not only was the door to interracial education open to those children, when the first class graduated, they all went on to complete their studies later in local schools, and many of them went on to college. The women who asked for that extra meeting with Rachel Dubois were concerned about how to bring up their children in an environment that was poisonous in its institutionalized racism. But they were also concerned about the purpose of education itself. This desire to prepare their children for the changes and challenges of American society comes through in an early brochure for Open Door, and I quote, "In keeping with the rapidly changing world, we felt Augusta needed a kindergarten which would reflect the continuing advances in education while building upon the heritage of the past. Opening the door to the future is the function of education as they saw it, literally." Also crucial to the founders was opening a door to racial harmony. And the brochure said, "In our rapidly shrinking world, the child who has experience in working on a give-and-take basis with persons from backgrounds other than his own has distinct advantages." Another door that the kindergarten opened slowly but surely was between its children and the wider Augusta community. The reaction of local people to the interracial school was by no means totally appreciative. One field trip the children went on was to the local fire department. But as they arrived, I even hate to think of this image, the firemen were lined up in a row to keep them out of the facility. The children got out of the cars and ran toward the firemen, who began to smile and began lifting the children onto the fire trucks. Another time, the children went to Bushfield Airport and were shown the inside of a real plane. It was a hot summer day, and the teacher forgot to bring containers of water. So they went to the motel that was there at the time, which was next door to the airport, And they asked inside if they could drink from the water fountain near the door, and the motel manager told the teacher to leave and take the black child with her. People who were registering at the motel overheard and immediately canceled their booking. They picked up their luggage and they followed the teacher and child out of the motel, and one of the motel workers who had heard the manager's remark met them outside with a drink for the child. So in the process of creating an inclusive atmosphere for educating the children, the kindergarten also helped to challenge the status quo and to change attitudes in Augusta. It was housed here at this church for nearly 2 decades until moving to the Congregation Children of Israel campus, where it operates today as Open Door Pre-K. The women who founded Open Door were acutely aware that they might be opening a door to something that could be threatening or dangerous for the children, parents, and teachers. And the founders of the school were so focused on the commitment they had to the effort that initially they weren't as concerned about safety as they suddenly became when the school was actually opening. Then they realized that apart from receiving threats on the telephone, they could be attacked or killed. Betty Hostetler, who played piano for the kindergarten music sessions, says that they were concerned that the big glass windows in the common room, which was the sanctuary at the time, could have been broken by rocks thrown at them. The Open Door Kindergarten was a daring act of love on the part of our congregation's spiritual ancestors. But so is the work that we do today, being a welcoming congregation to the LGBTQ community, and in nurturing addiction programs as a long-term host to Alcoholics Anonymous, who meet here 6 days a week, and also the peer support group for Mental Health Recovery International. Many of our members who take our 7th principles seriously are also members of the Sierra Club that meets here monthly. Welcoming is in our blood. It's our legacy. And who is more precious in being welcomed into our faith tradition than our children? And so on Mother's Day 2019, we want to acknowledge the many people who mother, who nurture, who care. But we are doing it with a slightly different focus by calling it Mama's Day. Mama's Day is an annual project of an organization called Forward Together, whose vision is a world where all families have the rights, recognition, and resources they need to thrive, free from oppression. And its website states, "We know that mamahood is not one size fits all, but most popular images of mothers exclude mamas based on their sexual orientation, race, income, immigration status, and more. And Mother's Day, one of the biggest commercial holidays in the United States, often reinforces traditional ideas of family and motherhood that narrowly define one way to be a family. That's why in 2011, the organization Forward Together created Mama's Day to highlight the contributions of the many mamas around us and to fight for the rights, recognitions, and resources our mamas and families deserve. Mama's Day originated as a project of the Strong Families Network, which unites 200 grassroots groups nationwide. Each year, Forward Together partners with artists to create original art that reflects the various ways our mamas and families look. So I urge you to go on to the Forward Together website to look at that art. But this morning, Mindy Gales, our Director of Lifespan Faith Development, will tell you more about why Mama's Day is especially important to her.
Thank you, Reverend Gaye.